So this session is all about people, which is good news because that makes every one of you an expert. But be that as it may, why aren't all places always perfect for all people if we're all experts? The good news is this session will clear all that up for you, so you're in the right place. And to start, I'm going to argue the case for a concept called behavioural urbanism in making people-friendly places. So, what on earth do I mean by behavioural urbanism? I'll get to it, but what we need to agree first is that towns and cities are good for us. They're at the cutting edge of whatever we choose to put our collective mind to, because they connect us together and speed up innovation. It's why cities evolved in the first place and continue to increase in size, to build on their success and innovation and allow more and more people to thrive. But in doing so, you could safely argue that in some places we surely lost sight of this. To cater for post-war redevelopment and rising urbanisation, grand urban projects like this were developed and whole cities were planned from on high with individual people not being thought about. And fueling these grand urban projects was the latest fashion, the latest technology, so cars started to go hand in hand with cities because it was easy. They took up a lot of space, they were very hard, they moved very fast compared with us, and they could also cover a lot of ground. So streets became roads and people were segregated, and the scale of places started changing to accommodate our decision. Rule books were also created to speed up delivery of places, standardising them and disconnecting these places from people. This standardisation was spoken about in terms of safety, but I would argue standardisation doesn't necessarily create safety, but one thing it does do is stifle innovation. So everything started to be delivered to these new rules and at this new scale. And looking back, I would say it was at this point when transport essentially grew arms and legs. Until this time, arguably, transport was not the result. It was a means to a greater end. Before this time, we had city planning for one, where we designed cities and places, with transport being a vital element to deliver a greater good, but not the end result. But why have we continued to perpetuate this way of working in many places? Instead of shaping cities around the very entity that makes them a success, which is people, why have we chosen to still shape many of them around the car? I think the way we have designed cities and streets is being perpetuated because on the whole we measure the success of any proposed changes against what is happening now, with no appreciation that now might not be right. What happens now is essentially just learned behaviour based on the environment around us, which has invited us to act in a certain way. And this is why I think focusing on behaviour is so fundamental. Because if we don't, we will carry on down this path, a path that on the whole hasn't been good for cities or for us. Cities globally are experiencing unprecedented levels of obesity, diabetes, stress, anxiety, and other mental health disorders directly because of how they've been designed. We're seeing an emerging inactivity crisis. We have shaped cities so people no longer need to move, going about their daily lives, making doing nothing one of the biggest killers in our society. We have a loneliness crisis today in cities, with some surveys identifying 15% of people feeling that they couldn't depend on a single person. We're told that high streets are dying. But the evidence is clear. If we increase the number of people walking and cycling in urban areas, it directly benefits the local economy. As people walking and cycling visit local shops more often and spend about 40% more over the course of a month than people driving. But all that aside, people are dying because of our past decisions. On average, 5 people are killed on UK roads, 75 seriously injured, and 400 slightly injured every day. And how we design cities has a huge impact on these figures. This is the simplest transport strategy you can ever write, and I implore you to plagiarise it and use it to deliver places with design. We're in a climate emergency, and the way we've shaped cities has played its part for sure. The UN has said we had 12 years to take action against climate change to keep global warming at a maximum of 1.5 degrees. Cities have an enormous part to play in this. Urban centres account for about 50% of greenhouse gas emissions, and urban infrastructure accounts for over 70% of global energy use. All the urban crises we face in cities today, sprawl, inactivity, social exclusion, climate change and inequality, they can all be tackled by the way we design our cities, but only if we design our cities to tackle them. And to do this, we have to think strategically about the and make the most of very valuable space and focus on clean, space-efficient, sociable transport as a means to an end. So scale is key. And when we start to consider the fact that the average European car is parked 92% of the time, we start to understand the scale of the missed opportunity. So how do we change behaviour? To get people to change their behaviour and choose the things that are better for cities and better for them, you don't tell people to do it. You have to compel them. And this is where I think we have an opportunity. Dare I say, the greatest design challenge in history. The 12-year deadline the UN gave us to make meaningful reductions in emissions is longer than it took Apple to get the concept of a smartphone in the hands of more than half the world's population. No legislators were needed to drive this meteoric rise, just the intense allure of compelling design. So I think we need to focus more on influencing behaviour alongside traditional engineering techniques to improve our urban areas and once again create places where people can thrive. But in this, we have a problem. People who believe in creative and behavioural solutions don't have a model. In essence, there's no lattice work on which to hang our ideas. Engineers, mathematicians and economists all have very robust lattice works, existing lattice works, on which they can hang their ideas and designs. We have a collection of insights without an overall model. And what that means is that when developing solutions, society has probably given too much priority to technical engineering solutions and not nearly enough to behavioural ones. This is because there is an imbalance in the way we treat creative, emotionally driven behavioural solutions versus the way we treat rational, rulebook driven ideas. If you're looking at creative solutions, and quite rightly, you have to share all your working out, all your thoughts, ideas and designs for approval by people far more rational than you. But this does not apply the other way around. People who have an existing framework, an engineering or economic framework, feel that their logic is its own answer. What they don't say is, well, this all seems to add up, matches the rule book, but before we sign it off, let's go show it to a load of nut jobs, artists and designers and see if they can come up with anything better. So with this, I would say we are artificially prioritising mechanistic ideas over behavioural ideas. But at the end of the day, is it not that we want to change people's behaviour? One of the best improvements to passenger satisfaction on the London Underground per pound spent ever came not when we increased the number of trains, but when we installed information boards on the platforms telling people how long to the next train. Because waiting is not only judged on its numerical or mathematical qualities, also it's judged on its behavioural qualities in terms of the level of uncertainty you have when you're waiting for your train to arrive. Waiting 10 minutes for a train when you know it's coming in 10 minutes is better than waiting 5 minutes when you don't know how long you'll be waiting for and you're sweating through your coat, freaking out you're going to be late. Another beautiful and entirely behavioural solution to road safety. In Korea, they install countdown clocks on red traffic lights. This is proven to reduce collisions and improve safety, essentially because the irritation and annoyance is massively reduced when you know how long you'll be waiting. By contrast, in China, maybe not fully comprehending the idea, they installed countdown clocks on green traffic lights. This really isn't a good idea. It basically invites you to floor it from 200 metres away when you've got 5 seconds left. The Korean government tested both. Road safety improves when you apply countdown on red lights and goes down when you install countdown on green lights. And if we're talking about road safety, we have to talk about speed reduction. Stockholm undertook a pilot study installing radar cameras to measure the speed of passing cars. Those above the speed limit received an automatic fine. Those below were entered into a lottery for a chance to win a portion of the fines from speeders. Average speeds fell from 32 kilometres an hour to 25. As well as physical interventions, behavioural urbanism has a powerful role to play in policy. To secure shared prosperity, cities have to provide a menu of ways for people to get around, to cater for distance, speed, income, mobility, and of course, taste, for example. Importantly, however, the consequences of people's decisions on how to get about must be transparent to them, to allow them to make informed choices. Right now in many cities, if you choose to drive a short trip for which you could otherwise walk, cycle, or take public transport, modes which are beneficial for the city and its people, that choice seems to have zero negative consequence for the chooser. What's more, if you have a fully insured car in your driveway with a full tank of petrol, the trip is, or at least seems, as good as free. But this choice actually does have huge negative consequences for the collective good and hinders a city in its ability to tackle some of the most pressing issues to do with climate change, urban growth, inequality, and inactive lifestyles. If we are to enable people to make informed decisions, should we not make it plain to them the cost of their choices rather than subsidise these choices? There are numerous examples of this type of pricing policy across the globe. In Singapore, for example, on top of the price of purchasing a car, insuring it, and filling the tank, you also have to pay for a 10-year certificate of entitlement. Antonio Guterres recently floated another idea to do with taxation policy. Tax pollution, not people, he said, highlighting the idea that we move a nation's taxation away from income tax on salaries towards a carbon tax on usage and emissions. Issues of implementation aside, this would surely have an impact on people's usage by better connecting the cost of transport choices to actions and influencing behaviour. It's no different from the idea of charging for plastic bags in the UK. 5 years ago, we never really thought about taking our own bag to the supermarket. Now the true cost of our actions have been better connected to our choices and has influenced our behaviour. Plastic bag usage in the UK has fallen by 86% in 5 years. What I'm arguing for, essentially, is more recognition of the power that behavioural urbanism can potentially have in tackling the challenges that cities face. One ideology or framework shouldn't reign supreme. We need to consider the entire human experience and focus solutions in this sweet spot between engineering, behavioural and technological frameworks. The key thing that we need to focus on as designers of cities, to my mind, is how do we compel people to change? Compel people to do what is best for the city, best for the society, but also best for themselves. People base their transport choices inevitably on the path of least resistance. If what is easiest is to drive because there is lots of parking, lots of space for it, we'll drive. If what is easiest is to walk, cycle, take public transport because the city invites it by providing safe, attractive and effortless infrastructure, we'll walk, we'll cycle and we'll take public transport. So how do we compel people to change through design? Here's one idea I'll leave you with, because I can't stress how serious I am about fun. We do so much because it is fun, even things that we might otherwise consider a little bonkers. This hedonism, this pursuit of pleasure, is a bloody powerful driver for human beings. So why don't we harness the power of hedonism for good and develop cities around this idea of hedonistic sustainability, which essentially flies in the face of old adages that the sustainable option is the watered down or fat-free version. Hedonistic sustainability is making what is good for the planet, good for the people, and good for cities the most enjoyable, most fun, and the most self-indulgent option, so people queue up for it. Thank you very much.